My brother gave his wife $150,000 to start a jewelry line the same month he told me he couldn't afford to save my son's life. They called it a seed investment. For her dream, they hashtagged it blessed. My son's name was Liam, and for 4 long years I watered a different kind of seed. Not of love, not of family, I planted a seed of patience. Of quiet, careful watching. I let it grow in the dark soil of their forgetfulness. And last week, it finally bore fruit. Now it's harvest time. The electronic gate, all sleek black iron and sharp angles, slid open with a whisper that felt like judgment. I stood on the wrong side of it, clutching my purse that had cost less than the weekly flowers in their entryway. The California sun beat down on my neck, but I felt cold. My name is Maya Santos. I'm 34 years old, and I was about to beg for my son's life. The walkway to my brother Julian's San Marino mansion was paved with imported stone, each slab perfectly aligned. Celeste, my sister-in-law, had once told me the landscaper charged $12,000 just to design this approach. "First impressions are everything, Maya," she'd said, smiling with all her perfectly whitened teeth. Today my first impression was that of a supplicant approaching a throne. My hands were sweating. I wiped them on my simple cotton dress, the nicest one I owned but still laughably out of place here. In my purse was a folder. Inside that folder was my 8-year-old son Liam's death sentence, neatly typed on cedar Sinai letterhead, and next to it, a potential pardon, information on a clinical trial at Johns Hopkins. The cost, not covered by any insurance, was $120,000. The timeline was 6 months, maybe a year if we were wildly lucky without it. Julian, my older brother by 7 years, had built a financial empire from what seemed like thin air and ruthless confidence. He and Celeste lived in a world of quiet luxury and loud philanthropy. Their names were on museum wings and charity galas. My world was a 1-bedroom apartment in Pasadena, a shifting schedule of hospital visits, and the constant, metallic taste of fear. Celeste opened the massive oak door herself, a vision in cream linen that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Maya, darling, come in." Her hug was a brief, fragrant press of air. She didn't quite make contact. "Julian's just finishing up a call in his study. Let's wait in the sunroom." The sunroom was a glass-walled marvel overlooking an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the Lowe's Angels Basin. I sat on the edge of a chair worth more than my car, the one I'd sold last month to pay for Liam's last round of scans. Celeste floated to a sofa, arranging herself. "How is Liam?" she asked, her tone carefully calibrated to convey concerned interest without inviting messy details. "He's tired," I said, my throat tight. "The new medications aren't working like they hoped. That's actually why I'm here." "Ah," she said, just as Julian entered. My brother had our father's strong jaw, but where our father's had been softened by laughter, Julian's was set in permanent assessment. He wore a casual cashmere sweater that probably cost $2,000 and looked utterly at ease. "Maya," he said, offering a brief, firm hand on my shoulder instead of a hug. "Good to see you. What's the situation?" This was it. I opened my purse, hands trembling, and laid the folder on the glass coffee table between us. I explained, my voice cracking at first but growing steadier as I spoke of oncologists and neuroblastoma, of immunotherapy and last-chance trials. I showed them the numbers. $120,000, I didn't beat around the bush. "Julian, Celeste, I need your help. I've exhausted everything. The insurance appeals, the charities, the payment plans. They want a down payment I could never save in time. Liam doesn't have time. I'm asking, I'm begging. For a loan, I will sign anything. I will pay you back every cent with interest. I'll get another job, Julian held up a hand. The gesture was polite, final. He hadn't even opened the folder. He leaned back, steepling his fingers, his gaze moving from me to the panoramic view and back. "Maya," he began, his voice the same calm, reasonable tone he likely used to dismiss underperforming fund managers. "What you're describing it's a tragedy. No one should have to go through this, least of all a child. Celeste nodded, her expression a perfect mask of empathetic sorrow. But, Julian continued, you're asking me to liquidate a significant amount of capital in an incredibly volatile market. My fund is heavily exposed right now, we're in a precarious position. Pulling that kind of liquidity could trigger a cascade. It's not for the fund, Julian, it's for Liam, your nephew, I said, the words feeling desperate and weak. And we love Liam, Celeste interjected smoothly. Which is precisely why we want you to think about the long-term ramifications for you, Maya, taking on that kind of debt, even from family. It would cripple you for decades. You need to pursue sustainable solutions. Sustainable solutions, a bitter laugh escaped me. He has a year to live, what's sustainable about that? Your emotional response is understandable, Julian said, as if diagnosing a minor flaw. But business and life really requires pragmatism. There are other avenues. More fundraising, clinical trial assistance programs. You need a financial advisor, not a bailout from family. I gestured around the room at the original David Hockney painting on the far wall at the silent Bersendorfer piano in the corner. You have a Hockney in your sunroom. The piano alone is what, $150,000? This isn't about liquidity, Julian, this is about choice. His expression hardened just slightly. The painting and the piano are assets. They're part of our financial picture. They're not liquid cash to be handed out for what is, let's be brutally honest, a highly experimental treatment with a low probability of success. We're not a charity, Maya. We're a family, and sometimes families have to make hard decisions to protect each other from poor choices. Poor choices. As if loving a sick child was a poor choice. As if not being a millionaire by 30 was a moral failing. Celeste reached over, patting my knee. It felt condescending. We will help, sweetie. We'll get you the name of our financial planner. He's brilliant with debt restructuring. And of course, we'll cover the cost of a nice therapist for you. Grief counseling is so important. I stared at them. At my brother, who valued his fund's stability over his nephew's heartbeat. At his wife, who thought a therapist could cure stage 4 cancer. The hope that had carried me through the gate curdled into something black and heavy in my stomach. I'm not asking for a therapist, Celeste. I'm asking for $120,000 to save my son's life. Julian stood, the conversation clearly over. The answer is no, Maya, I'm sorry, but it is. We have our own future to secure, our own commitments. You need to be realistic. Realistic. The word echoed in the silent, sun-drenched room as I gathered my worthless folder. Realistic meant watching my son die. Realistic meant they valued their assets and future commitments. The next vacation home, Celeste's upcoming jewelry line launch, I'd heard whispers about over a little boy's chance. They walked me to the door, no offer of a smaller amount. No, let me see what I can do. Just a firm, polite, financially justified no. Keep us updated on Liam, Celeste said as I stepped back onto the punishing stone walkway. I didn't turn around. The gate whispered shut behind me, locking me out of their world of calculated compassion. I sat in my beat-up Honda Civic, the steering wheel hot under my hands, and I cried tears of pure, undiluted rage. It wasn't just the money, it was the way they'd framed it, as if denying help was the responsible thing to do, as if they were protecting me from my own desperate love. The fight wasn't over, I told myself. I would find another way, I would move mountains. The mountains, it turned out, were made of granite and buried me alive. I went back to the hospital, to Liam's room where the walls were painted with cheerful cartoon animals that felt like a cruel joke. He was sleeping, his small body dwarfed by the bed, an IV line taped to his thin arm. I smoothed his hair, my heart a shattered thing in my chest. "Hey, buddy," I whispered when his eyelids fluttered open. He gave me a tired smile that didn't reach his eyes anymore. The spark, the relentless curiosity that had him asking about black holes and dinosaurs just months ago, was guttering. "Did Uncle Julian say yes?" he asked, his voice a thread. My throat closed. How could I explain asset liquidity and market volatility to an 8-year-old? How could I tell him his life was an unacceptable risk to a portfolio? "Not yet, sweetheart," I lied, forcing brightness into my voice. We're still working on the plan, the best plan. I threw myself into the other avenues. I started a GoFundMe, pouring my soul into the description, sharing photos of Liam before the sickness hollowed his cheeks. My friends, fellow bookstore employees, even some of Liam's old teachers gave generously. Strangers donated $5, $10 with beautiful messages. After a month, we'd raised $22,476, a miraculous, heartbreaking sum that wasn't even a fifth of what we needed. I took a night job stocking shelves at a warehouse, the physical exhaustion a welcome numbness. I sold my grandmother's silver, my modest collection of first editions, anything of value that wasn't Liam's. I ate rice and beans and used every spare cent for prescriptions and copies. And through it all, I watched their life on Celeste's Instagram. It was a curated hellscape. A week after my begging visit, a photo of them at the opening of the Julian and Celeste Vaughan Centre for Integrative Wellness at a local hospital. Julian cutting a ribbon, Celeste beaming. The caption, so humbled to support healing in our community, giving back is everything. The comments showered them with praise, angels, such generous hearts. I stared at the screen in the dark of my apartment, Liam's laboured breathing from the next room the only sound. Giving back is everything. Except when it was your nephew. Then the post that stopped my heart, a professional photo shoot. Celeste draped in dramatic, chunky necklaces and bold rings. The caption, dreams taking shape, so thrilled to announce the launch of my passion project, Etna Jewelry. None of this would be possible without my husband's unwavering belief and his brilliant eye for investing in potential. Etna Dream Chaser, love my CEO, the hashtag. Love my CEO, I felt sick. I found the business profile in a local magazine a few days later. Celeste Vaughan's Etna line, a bold fusion of art and adornment, is backed by an initial family investment of $150,000 with plans to scale rapidly. $150,000. The number burned itself into my vision. It danced in front of me when I closed my eyes. It was $30,000 more than I'd asked for. It was for jewelry, for baubles. For a passion project, while my passion, my child, faded in a hospital bed, I didn't confront them. What was the point? They'd have a justification. It's a business investment with ROI potential. It's different capital. It's her dream. Their language was a fortress and I had no weapons to breach it. Instead, something shifted in me. The hot, frantic rage cooled. It solidified into something dense, cold, and infinitely patient. I stopped crying. I stopped begging. I started watching. And I started writing. In a cheap notebook I began a ledger, not of dollars but of betrayals. May 15 asked for $120K for Liam's trial. Denied. Reason, liquidity issues. June 3 Etna launch announced. Seed investment $150K. Source LA Style Mag. June 20 Liam's 9th birthday, hospital room. Card from J&C, generic, no check, $0. July 10 their Instagram, 2-week digital detox in the Maldives. Estimated cost $50K plus dollars. August 5 Liam's condition downgraded. Palliative care discussed, me sold my laptop for $300. August 20 their post, donated $75K to the opera for new costumes. Supporting the arts is vital. The ledger grew. Each entry was a tiny cut and I let them bleed. I stopped calling them. They called occasionally, perfunctory check-ins. How's Liam? They'd ask, and before I could answer with the grim truth, they'd talk about the stress of choosing fabric for their private jet's interior refurbishment, or the crisis with a landscaper who used the wrong shade of white gravel. Liam died on a rainy Tuesday in November, 3 weeks before what would have been his last Christmas. He went quietly, his small hand in mine, his last word a whispered "Mama." The world didn't end. It simply turned grey and hollow, a shell of itself. Julian and Celeste came to the funeral. They were a splash of monochrome elegance in the small, dreary chapel. They stayed for half the service. Julian gave a short, stiff eulogy that mentioned Liam's brave struggle and the unfathomable mysteries of God's plan, but said nothing of laughter, of Lego castles, of a little boy's love for frogs and space. It was a eulogy for an abstract concept, not my son. Afterwards, Celeste hugged me, her cheek dry against mine. "Let us know about the final expenses," she murmured. "We can probably cover the basic costs, the urn or something." The urn or something. I didn't scream, I didn't rage, I just nodded, my face a mask of numb acceptance. "Thank you," I heard myself say, the words automatic, empty. They left quickly, citing a prior commitment, a dinner with potential investors from Dubai that couldn't be moved. I watched their black town car glide away from the curb, away from the raw, ugly reality of death, back to their world of deals and decorum. That night, alone in the apartment that felt cavernous without Liam's breathing, his toys, his presence, I opened my notebook to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote a new heading, post-mortem, and I began to plan. Grief is a curious thing. It has phases, the screaming pain, the numbness. And then, for some, a cold, clear clarity. I entered that clarity. The love I had for my brother was dead, buried alongside Liam. What remained was a forensic understanding of the people he and Celeste were. They were not monsters. Monsters are simple. They were something more insidious. People who had convinced themselves that their prosperity was a result of superior rationality, and that their choices, no matter how cruel, were therefore wise. I would need to speak their language to ever make them understand. I would need to be smarter, colder, and more patient than they could ever imagine. The first year was about survival. The medical debt was catastrophic. The bills from the funeral home arrived, a final insult. Julian's basic costs offer never materialized. It had been a line spoken to be heard by others at the funeral, not a promise. I declared bankruptcy. The shame was profound, but it was also a clean slate, a scorched earth from which I could only grow something tougher. I quit the bookstore. The kindly owner had held my job for months, but I couldn't bear the memories. Liam running his small fingers along the spines in the children's section. I needed a new identity, one not defined by loss. I enrolled in community college, using the last of my savings to take courses in accounting and business law. Numbers were clean. They didn't get sick. They didn't die. They added up or they didn't. I was good at it. The methodical nature of it was a balm. During the day, I worked as a receptionist at a grim dental office, fielding calls from people worried about root canals while I answered with a hollow cheeriness, my own roots feeling completely severed. At night, I studied under the harsh glow of a second-hand desk lamp, my textbooks filled with margins, notes in my tight, precise script. I lived on instant noodles and cheap coffee, but every month I forced myself to put $50, then $100 into a savings account I labeled future. I didn't know what the future was, but I knew it required capital, and I watched them. Social media made it effortless. Their lives were a public performance. There was the ski trip to Aspen where they wore matching burgundy ski suits. The intimate dinner party for 40 to celebrate Julian's fund's record-breaking quarter, where the centerpieces were orchids flown in from Hawaii. The launch party for Eaton's winter collection, held at an art gallery with ice sculptures that I noted with grim satisfaction probably cost more than my entire month's budget. Celeste was interviewed in a lifestyle blog. "It's about empowering women through adornment," she said. "My husband saw the vision before anyone else. He's my rock." I took a screenshot. I began a digital folder, a more sophisticated version of my notebook. I saved every post, every article, every public record of their spending. I learned to read SEC filings to track the performance of Julian's fund, understanding terms like leveraged buyout and short interest that had once been meaningless jargon. I followed business news religiously, my morning ritual shifting from checking Liam's temperature to checking the stock tickers of Julian's largest holdings. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was conducting a long-term intelligence operation. The second year, I landed a low-level job at a small but respectable accounting firm called Henderson and Lowe. The pay was meager, but it was a foot in the door of a world that understood the language of value, of assets and liabilities, of balance sheets, the very language that had been weaponized against me. I worked relentlessly, staying late to reconcile accounts no one else wanted to touch, volunteering to organize the chaotic filing system. My diligence was noted. My boss, a weary but kind man named Mr. Henderson who wore the same brown corduroy jacket every day, began giving me more complex tasks. "You've got a good head for this, Maya," he said one evening as I was preparing a client's tax extension. Quiet but thorough, I earned a promotion to junior accountant. My future savings grew slowly, painfully, like a plant pushing through concrete. That Christmas, a card arrived from Julian and Celeste. A generic snowy scene, a pre-printed signature. No personal note. Inside was a gift card to Neiman Marcus where even the socks cost $100. I sold it online for $85 cash and deposited it directly into my savings, the transaction feeling like a small, secret reclamation. The third year, I passed my CPA exams on the first try. The sense of accomplishment was a quiet, private flame that burned away a little more of the lingering shame. I changed firms, moving to a more aggressive mid-sized company called Sterling Financial that handled high-net-worth individuals and small businesses. I specifically requested to work on forensic accounting and litigation support cases, tracking money through shell companies, finding discrepancies in ledgers, unraveling the financial stories people tried to hide. It was satisfying in a dark way. I was becoming an expert in following trails of wealth, in understanding how people hid their true priorities in columns of numbers. I bought a better laptop. I subscribed to financial databases like Bloomberg Terminal Access through my firm. My surveillance became professional grade. I could track the valuation of Eatonor, stagnant, quietly propped up by continual discrete infusions from Julian's fund that were listed as marketing expenses. I noted when they refinanced their mansion to pull out equity, likely to cover lifestyle costs. I saw the whispers in financial blogs that Julian's investment strategies were becoming riskier, more speculative, that he was over-leveraged in a few volatile tech stocks chasing the next big thing. The seed of patience in me began to put out a tendril of something else, cold, calculated anticipation. I started saving more aggressively. My lifestyle remained austerely focused. I moved to a slightly better apartment in a quieter building, but it was still small, functional, with walls I painted a soothing sage green. I didn't travel. I didn't buy nice clothes beyond what was necessary for work. Every bonus, every tax return went into the fund. It was no longer just future. I renamed the account file, balance sheet. The fourth year, the cracks in their facade became public. It started with a bad earnings call from one of Julian's flagship tech holdings, a company promising revolutionary biometric data that seemed to have revolutionary losses instead. Then a prominent short seller published a damning 90-page report questioning the fund's valuations and its exposure to shaky derivatives. The financial news, once full of fawning profiles about the wunderkind of West Coast finance, turned skeptical, then openly hostile. I watched Julian's television interviews grow defensive, his once calm demeanor showing fissures of strain, his answers becoming jargon-filled deflections. Celeste's social media posts became less about lavish parties and more about resilience, weathering storms with grace, and photos of simple home-cooked meals that somehow still featured a $200 bottle of wine in the background. The Eatonor account went quiet, then posted a vague announcement about a strategic pivot and temporary online store closure for redesign. Then, the collapse. It was swift and brutal. A regulatory investigation was announced, probing insider trading allegations related to those volatile tech stocks. Panic spread. Several major institutional investors, the bedrock of Julian's fund, pulled their capital simultaneously, triggering the very liquidity crisis he had once fictitiously feared to deny me. The fund was frozen. Lawsuits were filed by furious investors. The headlines were merciless. Vaughan Fund implodes, from penthouse to foreclosure. The high cost of hubris. I read every article, every comment section full of schadenfreude, with the detached focus of a scholar studying a predictable economic model. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, icy sense of validation. The universe, in its clumsy, amoral way, was enforcing a crude form of arithmetic. They had prized financial stability and appearance above human life, and now they had neither. My phone rang a week after the news broke. A number I hadn't dialed in years. Julian, I let it go to voicemail. He called again an hour later, and again that evening. A text followed late at night. Maya, we need to talk, it's urgent. I waited 3 full days. I wanted them to marinate in their uncertainty, to taste the helplessness I had swallowed for years, to feel the walls closing in with no realistic escape. When I finally listened to the voicemails, his voice was stripped of its polished confidence. It was ragged, older, laced with a panic he couldn't disguise. Maya, please, it's about the house, the bank. They're moving faster than I thought. We have weeks. We need help. I typed a 1-word reply, details. The response was a torrent of desperation. Scanned copies of the foreclosure notice, the reinstatement figure, $185, 327, 41, the desperate pleas, we have nowhere to go. Celeste isn't sleeping, you're successful now, we see your LinkedIn, your family, you have to help. The echo of my own past pleas was perfect, a poetic symmetry that was not lost on me. I replied, my fingers steady on the keys, my apartment. Saturday, 11 a.m. Do not be late. I spent Friday in a state of focused preparation. I printed select documents from my extensive digital folder. The stark clinical trial invoice, the glossy magazine article about the $150,000 seed investment, side-by-side screenshots of their most obscene displays of wealth alongside the calendar dates of Liam's most harrowing hospitalizations. I dressed not in my old, pleading cotton dress, but in a sharp, charcoal grey tailored blazer and trousers I'd bought for important client meetings. I applied a little makeup, not to look pretty but to look polished, impenetrable. I looked successful, composed, untouchable, a mirror of who they used to be. They arrived at exactly 11:00, as if clinging to punctuality as the last vestige of control. They looked shrunken, diminished. Julian's suit, though still expensive, was wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. His eyes were bloodshot webs of stress. Celeste had aged a decade in a matter of months, her usually flawless makeup absent, revealing fine lines of panic around her mouth and the pale shadow of roots at her part. They stood in my modest living room like displaced royalty in a peasant's hut, eyes darting around, taking in the simple IKEA furniture, the single bookshelf filled with accounting textbooks and a few novels, the framed photo of Liam on the mantel, him grinning, missing a front tooth, forever 9. Maya, Julian began, his voice cracking on the first syllable. He cleared his throat, tried again. Thank you for seeing us. I didn't offer them a seat, I let them stand. You said you needed $185,000. Yes, he said, the word a gasp. To stop the foreclosure, to reinstate the mortgage, we'll sign anything. A formal loan, outrageous interest, a lien on the house, it's still worth triple that even in this market. We just need time to regroup, to sort this out. Celeste nodded, her hands twisting together in a nervous knot. We're so ashamed to ask, but you're our only hope, family is, Family is all you have when everything else falls apart. Hope, I repeated, letting the word hang in the quiet room. I walked to my small dining table where I had laid out the documents in a neat, accusatory line. Hope is a precious thing. I remember needing it. I remember what it costs when it's denied. I pointed to the first paper. This was my hope, $120,000. Julian's eyes dropped to the medical invoice. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Maya, that was a different situation. The capital wasn't liquid. The treatment was a long-shot gamble. We had to think of the bigger picture. And this, I asked, my tone flat as I tapped the magazine article. Was $150,000 in liquid capital, a wise, strategic investment for gemstone necklaces and gold-plated rings? What was the projected ROI on that, Julian? What was the EBITDA of my son's life for you to make that comparative analysis? Celeste flinched as if struck. That was a business, a creative venture. It was about building something. And Liam was a child, not a venture. A life, I said, my voice still calm, icy, leveraging the business terms they revered against them. You made a choice. You presented it as financial prudence, as risk management, but it was a value statement. You value vanity projects over family. You value public perception over private suffering. Your asset allocation reflected your moral priorities. We made a mistake, Julian burst out, his composure shattering, his face flushing an ugly red. We were wrong. Is that what you want to hear? We were wrong. We failed you. We failed Liam. Now, please, we are drowning here. I know what drowning feels like, I said quietly, taking a step closer. I know the sound of it. It's not the sound of a falling stock ticker. It's the sound of an oxygen machine hissing in a silent room at 3 a.m. It's the sound of your own heartbeat thudding in your ears when the doctor uses the word palliative. It's the sound of absolute silence after a child's last breath. You are in over your head, Julian. I lived at the bottom of that ocean for a year. I let the silence stretch, let them squirm in it, let them feel the weight of the water. Then I picked up a single sheet of blank paper and an expensive fountain pen from the table, an affectation I'd bought for this moment. Next to it, I placed a cashier's check, already made out to Julian and Celeste Vaughan, for the full amount of $185,327.41. Their eyes locked on it with a hunger that was both pathetic and deeply, fundamentally satisfying. It was the same look I'd seen in Liam's eyes when he was too weak to ask for water. Here is my offer, I said. You will take this check, you will save your house, you will have your second chance, the one you denied Liam. They stared, hope and dread warring on their faces. They knew, with the sharp instinct of predators turned prey, that there would be a price far beyond money. The terms, I continued, my voice dropping to a near whisper that forced them to lean in. First, you will sit here now and write a statement, in your own handwriting. You will detail the date, the request I made for Liam, the exact amount, and the reason for your refusal. You will detail the date and amount of the $150,000 investment in Etna made immediately thereafter. You will write clearly and without euphemism. We chose to invest in a jewelry business rather than save our nephew Liam's life. You will both sign and date it. Julian's face purpled again. That's extortion, humiliation, you can't ask for that. No, I corrected, my gaze steady. It's documentation, it's a receipt, it's the truth made tangible. You asked me to be realistic. This is the ultimate realism, putting the unambiguous truth on paper so we all remember what it's worth, so you remember the market price of your nephew. Second, I said, cutting off his next protest. Upon taking this check, you will never contact me again. You will remove me from all wills, all trusts, all family records. You will not call, text, email, or send carrier pigeons. You will tell anyone who asks that I am dead or estranged or whatever story lets you sleep at night in the house this bought. To you I cease to exist. As Liam ceased to exist for you, the moment he became an inconvenient line, item on your moral balance sheet. Celeste was crying now, silent tears tracking through the powder on her cheeks. You can't mean that, we're family, we're your blood. You ended that, I said, my voice finally allowing a sliver of the old, bottomless pain to show through the ice. You ended it when you valued your assets over his heartbeat, when you quantified his life and found it lacking. This isn't family. This is a settlement, a final transaction, a closing of the books. I pushed the blank paper and the pen toward them. The check is yours, the choice is yours, you have 5 minutes to decide, the clock starts now. They looked at each other, a silent, frantic conversation passing between them, a lifetime of shared privilege and superiority crumbling in the face of total loss. I saw the exact moment Julian's pride, his towering ego broke against the unyielding rocks of his desperation. His shoulders collapsed inward. He seemed to physically shrink. He picked up the pen, its weight seeming enormous in his hand. He sat at my table in my cheap chair and began to write. His handwriting, usually a bold, assertive scrawl, was shaky and small, each letter a struggle. Celeste watched him, her sobs quiet hiccups she tried to stifle with a trembling hand. When he finished, he shoved the paper toward her without looking up. She signed her name beneath his in a messy, tear-blotted script, without even reading the damning words. I picked up the paper. I read their confession aloud in a flat, clear courtroom voice, ensuring every syllable landed. On May 14th, our sister Maya Santos asked us for a loan of $120,000 to pay for an experimental, life-saving clinical trial for our nephew, Liam Santos, who was terminally ill with neuroblastoma. We refused this request, citing concerns about liquidity and the speculative nature of the treatment. On June 10th of the same year, we invested $150,000 from our liquid assets into the launch and development of Celeste's jewelry business, Etana. We prioritized this business investment over Liam's medical treatment. We acknowledge this choice. I looked up from the paper, meeting Julian's defeated gaze, then Celeste's watery one. And the consequence, I prompted, my voice soft. Julian's voice was a ghost of itself, and he died. I nodded once. I placed the cashier's check in the exact center of the table. It's yours. Julian snatched it up, his fingers clutching the paper so tightly it crumpled at the edges, holding it to his chest like a holy relic or a life preserver. They stood, awkward, broken, radiating a desperate need to flee this room, this truth, this version of themselves they had just made permanent. Goodbye, I said, turning my back on them decisively and walking to the window, looking out at my unimpressive view of a parking lot and a stucco wall. I heard the soft click of my door closing. The transaction was complete. The ledger at long last was balanced. I waited an hour, motionless, letting the silence settle. Then I went to my computer. I carefully scanned their handwritten confession. I opened the extensive digital dossier I'd compiled over 4 years, a master file containing timelines, financial records, screenshots, articles, a chilling juxtaposition of their relentless public ascent with Liam's private descent. I wrote a concise, factual, unemotional cover letter that simply stated, for context regarding the recent financial downfall of Julian and Celeste Vaughan, please see the attached documentation of their prior financial decisions and priorities. And then, with a deep, steadying breath that felt like the first clean breath after a long illness, I began to send it. I emailed it to every member of our extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins scattered across the country. I sent it to the society editors at the Los Angeles Times and the Hollywood Reporter. I sent it to the board of directors of the Julian and Celeste Vaughan Center for Integrative Wellness. I sent it to the business reporters at the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg, who are currently dissecting their downfall. I sent it to the investor relations firms that had once promoted Julian's fund. I didn't send it out of spite or in a flash of anger. I sent it for the same reason I gave them the money: finality, transparency, and truth. They could keep their house bought with blood money and a signed confession, but they would never again control the narrative. The world would know the precise, horrific cost of their blessed life. Their money was gone. Now their reputation, their carefully curated image of benevolent, savvy success would follow it into the abyss. My phone began to buzz almost immediately. First my Aunt Linda, then my cousin Marco, then numbers I didn't recognize, likely reporters. I let them all ring. I had said all I needed to say. I had written the final chapter myself. I walked to the mantel and picked up the framed photo of Liam. I traced the outline of his smiling face with my finger. "It's done, baby," I whispered to the quiet room, to his memory. "The balance sheet is clean." The seed I had planted in the darkest, most barren soil of my grief had not grown into a tree of forgiveness or reconciliation. It had grown into a vine of stark, unforgiving truth, a vine that would now wrap itself around the foundations of their false world and in time pull it all the way down to earth. I had my justice. It wasn't sweet. It was as complex, bitter, and strangely empty as the grief that had birthed it. But it was mine. It was complete. And for the first time in 4 long, hard years, the quiet in my apartment felt not like absence but like peace. A hard-won, expensive, perfectly balanced peace.